for a little more quirky action. Got a little bit of time in between things right now, so thought I would jump back into our quirky here. So I'm just going to get right back into it. I'm in Clip Studio Paint. This is session number 3, work in progress number 3, creating this quirky. We've kind of got the character line art nailed down for the most part. So now we're going to be into color. Actually going to start by making a new folder specifically for that. So we'll call this color. And then I'm going to start with some flat colors and then go from there. So I'm going to stick with initially just stick with the color palette that's in the actual quirky here. So that makes this a little bit easier. Let's see. Oh, there is a way. There's a way to actually use the line art, but as I said in an earlier video, it's been too long since I've been in Clip Studio on a regular basis. So I'm going to have to do this kind of the hard way, which is to essentially, it's not that big of a deal, but essentially kind of outline the area that I'm going to color in and then color it in from there. It's fine. All right, so this will just take a little longer than if I could just use the line art as a container. I know there is a way to do that, but I'll figure that out another time. Refigure that out another time. Boom, boom, boom. So I'm going to just hide the reference for the moment because we know that this is the color of, actually, is the neck that color as well? I'm sure it is, yeah. All right, and again, I'm going to kind of keep each color on a separate layer so that I can adjust things later if I want to. And I'll just actually go through this and then put the skull in on top as well. So then I can go and just fill that in. All right, and go on to the next thing. We'll eyedropper the basic color of the hoodie and hide this. Go on to here and put that in. Same process. Actually, I did put it behind the head, right? So I don't need to be precise about that part at all. Okay, and I think the hat is actually what I used for the background color, but I'm going to go with the lighter color for the hat. And now that we have, put this in, I'll actually change the paper color to now be that color as well. Oh, why didn't that work? Maybe I have to hit OK. There we go. So change the background to that now so that that will match. I'm going to put the hat in, going with the lighter purple initially. And do the same thing. We'll start dealing with some light and shadow after this. Hope everybody is having a wonderful day today. And if you want to know more about what's going on at Macroverse this week, we will be doing our weekly update live stream on YouTube and here on Twitter at 5 o'clock Pacific time. So we'll be talking about what's new on the mobile app and what's new in some other stuff that we've been working on, projects, Drip House, all kinds of fun stuff. All right, so now we'll do the skull. Oops, actually using the wrong brush, but shouldn't matter for this part. Okay. I didn't do the donuts as a separate thing, so I'll want to get to that in a minute as well. But first, we'll do the interior eye color. Oh, wrong brush again. That actually just is the line color, isn't it? Which makes sense. Okay, and then the interior skull color. Oh, I missed the nose there too, didn't I? All right. Just do this backwards for that. Okay. All of a sudden, we start to have a much more realized character. And this is really actually only the beginning. All right. So I think what I'll do is go ahead and put in the donuts. Anyone that saw me do the line art for the donuts, got to be going like, why couldn't you just do it like this? Which is a very good question because right now this is pretty smooth. Okay, and then let's get these bubbles, particles as I've been calling them. And we can turn the background back on for that. This is not the style that I'm going to finish this in, but in another version, if this was going to be more animated, you could actually use something like this as kind of the highlight, for making this feel more dimensional. So I'll use this one. So like if we wanted to, we could leave some of the lighter color of the background showing through, and it makes that feel like that's a little highlight, and therefore dimensional on top of that. Gonna have to deal with this overlap as we get into the finish as well. There'll be some relayering probably, but it's fine for now. Or I don't know, probably won't erase underneath. I'll probably just relayer that. All right, and fill these in. Goodbye highlights. Okay, so flat color, pretty much done. And, in a world where we wanted to keep this, very much the style of the original, we'd be pretty much finished here. But I'm going to push this kind of now into my style. And the other thing I'm going to do is go find the hue and actually move that now to the color layer. And we're going to recolor that. Actually, probably just do it with a selection. Going to recolor it. I believe it's just the same color as the So actually, I'll move that back in there, but then above the hat layer, I'll make a new one and color it in there. And then when I go and turn it off in here, it should, yeah, get rid of that. All right, so that handles that part as well. Is that what I just did? Where did I put it? See, this is why we need to label these. So this is eyes, nose. This is inside skull. This is skull. This is head. This is particles. These are the donuts. Is this the Q? Yep. Hat Q. This is the hat. And this is the hoodie. All right. So there we go. Now the fun begins for me. Let's see, one other thing I was going to check here. All right, so that's my flat color. The first thing I'm going to do right away is I do want to be able to see a little difference between the background and the foreground. And we'll see. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do with this yet, because there's something nice about the color of the original head kind of just being the color of the background, like the way that works right now. Excuse me, there is something nice that's that would be nice to try to get some sense of, but I also want to create some texture and some dimensionality here. So I think that's going to end up moving away from that a bit, but we're going to try to split the difference as we get into it. So the first thing I'm going to do is pick a shadow color. And what I may do is play with actually like this kind of palette, this kind of pastel palette. So I'm going to make a background layer. And then just to get something down, you'll see that, what I tend to like to do is work with all these different textures. And talked about this in a previous stream, where I love using all of these brushes that replicate old school printing techniques. And then they do it kind of in the service of, you'll see as I go along, things that are only now possible because of the way we can use digital blending and digital effects to create this kind of entirely different approach. So actually going to use this one, this kind of big dot pattern, just to throw in a background, which will help pull the foreground away. And just as I work on this, help kind of clarify what's going on. So I'm going to throw that in there like that. And already looks pretty cool. I like it. So we'll go with that. And actually, this is a case where I want to fill that in. I don't know if you'll ever see it, but if you ever wanted to like animate this or do something with it, you would want to have those layers. And I tend to be I'm a kind of insane future proofer about file size and layer orders and things like that, because you never know what you're going to want to do with some of these art or assets down the road. So having that flexibility built in from the beginning doesn't take a lot of extra time if you know that that's where you're headed with it. So, all right, so we're going to keep all of our flat colors here. Now I'm going to start initially with just some shadow. And what I tend to do is pick one shadow color. I'm going to try using this same purple and just see how that works when we start to do some blending. So I'm going to pick another dot pattern. I'm going to make something. I need a new layer. I renamed the folder, not the layer. Oops. So this is color. There's nothing here, right? Yeah. Okay. This is shadow. So you'll find that, in simple terms, and you can get very complex with this, but in simple terms, like the same shadow color in real life you're affected by the light and shadow of the situation that you're in. So using a color for shadow does actually, like a single color for the shadow and a single color for the light source initially, does start to bring everything into the same kind of cohesive color world. So I'm just going multiply for now. This won't be the the final effect, but just to start to get some dimensionality down. I have to think about where I want the light source to be. And I'm thinking because of the turn of the head, it's just going to look best if we've got kind of light hitting that skull and hitting that face. So we're going to pick like an upper left hand, or left side of the picture plane, left hand light source going down that way. And that will start to inform my decisions as far as how I start to put in shadow. So again, this probably won't stay purple, but it will help to kind of begin to think about how we start to build in some dimensionality around how this all works. And you'll see, like we're going to build this up over time with multiple textures, multiple effects as it goes. These curves. So, it's kind of cool. Like even immediately you start to get this little bit of sense of depth just from starting to add some shadow here. And in this stage, this is just going to be, again, sort of everything that is going to get shadow is going to get basically this effect, this approach. And then we'll pull out other highlights and things after the fact. Just a brush, adjusting brush size in some cases just to be able to get into some smaller corners. One thing I think I am genuinely good at is thinking in 3 dimensions when it comes to light and shadow. Like that's something that kind of comes relatively intuitively natural to me. And then, of course, can always be worked on and improved like everything. But, even just that little bit, we start to feel like there's some real dimensionality in our quirk here. Kids are also going to be getting home from school pretty soon, so there might be a little bit of an interruption with a hello from my 7-year-old, about to be 8-year-old, and then my almost 11-year-old will be home pretty soon after that as well. So I think this one, because of the way that light is going to be hitting, we're going to do kind of a little bit of a backlight kind of situation here. May adjust that later as it continues, but I don't think we're going to get quite the same kind of full effect on the stalk there on that antenna. All right, and then let's start to get just a little bit with the hat, but most of that is light hitting the top of that sphere. And then think about lighting this way. That is going to kind of project a shadow back behind the antenna. And then we're going to want to get some additional depth here in the bottom of the ball as well. And so I'm kind of just like, even though you can see like this starts to connect to some of what I had already put in here, and we'll end up bringing some of that back. For me, it just helps me think through how the light is going to fall on this object by kind of figuring out the different planes as I'm rendering it in. Okay, so again, for me, this is kind of in stages. This is just the very first bit of starting to define the shapes and planes here with the hat. So I'm gonna, like, a little bit of light is gonna hit that seam, and so we're gonna get just a little bit of shadow behind that. Whereas this side is mostly in shadow, so that little bit of light hitting that seam will be seen more prevalently there. Okay. And then the way, let's see, at the bill, like that front edge is going to get like a pretty strong highlight, but then this edge is in shadow. And I'm going to say that, kind of the hat under here, we might come back and we will do something with this, probably a little bit more, but be something like that for now. And then for these guys, so light's coming here. Going to be kind of building, let's see, think about this for a second. So definitely going to be like that, although might have a little light hitting the inside rim there. So I might tweak that as we come back around to it. Probably will, actually. So but that's all right at this stage. And this one is going to be kind of the opposite, where you have to think about, actually this side is going to be more in shadow, actually. It's going to be more like that. I think I'm going to do these little balls kind of all on their own, so we'll come back to that as well. It's going to be something like that. And then, just because I do want to keep this kind of shadow color consistent throughout at the moment, we'll get the hoodie in here as well. Now, so kind of thinking about how some of these wrinkles will play out here. If we're going light source this way, then this is definitely going to be more in shadow over here. We'll actually be getting quite a bit more shadow hitting the kind of the front here also. So to kind of think about how exactly we want to do this, but maybe something more like this. Yeah, I can always pull out a highlight or two later when we get into doing more lighting. So I think that it's good to just throw, let's just kind of go for it with the amount of shadow that we're pushing over here. Yeah, helps really solve the effect of it being turned that way. So, all right, so that's kind of step one is the shadow side of things as the beginning. And here's what I love about this. So like I just switched over to kind of see what you're seeing in the live stream. Maybe it's hard to tell. Like you can really see the dot pattern in the background. But what I love about this is like when you're looking at it on screen, like this just kind of feels like the beginning of kind of a normal bit of rendering. But once you start to get in tight, you can really see like how crazy this effect is. And like this dot pattern, and again, kind of why I love it, this kind of old school printing effect. The dot pattern is not perfect. It's not like a machined feeling. It feels like old printing, old screen printing, old offset printing. And as that continues to evolve and be applied, to me, it just gets cooler and cooler and cooler. Then I'll also play with some different blending modes. You can kind of see what those do to the different colors. So I always kind of start with something relatively normal, but sometimes you end up with some really cool effects playing with what these different blending modes do when the colors combine. Like, something like that starts to get pretty cool, and like you could do something with that. I think I'm going to stay a little more, like I do want to be sensitive to this kind of pastel color palette, the Quirkies color palette. So I'm going to go linear burn, I think, instead of multiply. So you get a little more of the underlying color in the shadow area, but it still feels like it's in that color range. So there is that. So now we've done the shadow side, first part of the shadow side, and we'll now do the next part, which is the light side. And if you're doing something for like animation or simpler effects, this might be as far as you go. It might just do flat color, shadow, light, and often that is enough for something that's meant to be a little simpler, especially if it's for animation or motion. But we're going to go quite a bit further than that with this piece. So in this case, let's start with this pink. And then I want to adjust the hue and saturation of this a little bit. So using that just to get kind of a baseline for there we go, hue, saturation, and vibrance. So I'm going to push the hue a little more towards yellow, but we're staying in the same world of the saturation and the amount of darkness that we have there. So I'm going to use this yellow as the light side. I'm going to go ahead and switch to a different tone, different pattern, and I'm going to go with a line effect at this point. Let's see. Yeah, probably that one, but let's see. That one or something more in here. Just testing. Yeah, I want it to be going that way. So I can adjust the amount of the size of the pattern in here, and I'm going to bring it down a bit. And actually going to go for probably a slightly denser one, maybe. Yeah. So I still wanted to have the effect of the lines, but I wanted to read like a more solid color. All right, so we'll do that. And then pop in the light side of things, the light side of the force, so to speak. And so here's an example. So in color theory, yellow and purple are also opposites of the, they're complementary colors. So they're opposite on the color wheel, basically. And anytime you use complementary colors, they pop. And sometimes that can be a very good thing, and sometimes it can be too much. So you have to kind of evaluate that as you go. But can definitely be used for effect. Oh, whoops, I went to the wrong brush, which is why that looks different up there. There we go. If there are any Into the Spider-Verse fans, that movie was when I started to experiment with this style. Kind of the aesthetic of how they were using dot patterns and things in the animation, which I still think is so cool. Okay. I'm not going to add highlights in there just yet. Let's see how this works with the skull. So this is where I come in and start to, again, experiment with what the right color settings would be. The skull is so light that I may just have to treat that a little differently. Not really worry about highlights right now. Like, I think the color of the skull is basically going to be the highlight. So yeah, I'm not going to worry about that right now. But can still see how we feel about what blending mode might be best for our highlight color at this stage. No, I don't just want it to completely turn white. So I'm looking for something that kind of keeps a little touch of the yellow in there without necessarily being full on normal either. Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to have to play with this a little bit more as we get a little further down the road. You know, there are illustrators who I love who just immediately know exactly what they're going to do for the most part and just dive in and do it. Sometimes I am that person, but more often than not, it's looking at a bunch of different things and finding kind of the right, just finding the right mode, the right moment, the right application along the way. All right, I'm going to go with that for now. Probably not going to stay that. All right, but for now. Whoa, that went off the rails. Okay. So kind of the same thing here. It's like I'm finding the planes of the light where I think light is hitting here, similar to how I did that with the shadow side. And here are the places in this live stream where it gets a lot less lively. So apologize for that, but moments where it's just like in the moment of laying down whatever it is that's coming down. All right, so may have to call it for the day, for the moment, at least for this stream in a moment. But we're starting to get somewhere. So got some light, got some shadow. I think the one thing that seems pretty clear is we need a lot more light up here. So we're actually getting quite a bit of this in the light side. If this was a sphere, we'd be seeing a lot more light hitting the top of that sphere. So make sure we represent that. And then again, this will not quite stay quite so hot, let's say, like quite so much contrast. We're gonna work on minimizing that so you get a little more subtlety and also focus on a little more depth in the skull and so forth. Actually, I think that is kind of the thing I want to do before we call it for this stream. First of all, I'll get a couple of highlights here in the way that we're coming into the eyes and the nose. And this is a kind of a basic example of what I started to talk about when you kind of look at the way these different textures overlap. So again, not obvious until you really get in here, but like the lines overlapping the dots there, and as the colors start to build on top of each other, it's a cool effect. All right. So yeah, last thing I'm going to do is do a little something different or special with the skull. Going to add just another layer in here. So I think this skull color is going to basically be our highlight for the most part, which means we need to knock this down a little bit. And so I'm going to use that as the basis of it, and then just make it a little bit darker. I think maybe we nudge it slightly. Should it be? I think actually nudge it slightly yellow. Again, just the offset against the pink, I think will work well there. And let's pick another different texture. I think more like that. Feels pretty good to me. We'll bring the size of it down just a little bit. Not quite that much. All right. And then I think we're just going to give this a overall skull. Whoops. Can't just do it that way though. All right. To do it a little more carefully. But you have kind of an overall skull texture here. And this will give us a basis to work against when we actually do pull out the highlights. So just covering the whole thing, including where the shadows are, because that will also put the shadows working kind of against that color. And I may end up doing something similar to this in other areas too, because I don't really want, in this particular piece, much of anything that is completely untextured. That is something that I do sometimes. You can use things that have texture versus areas that don't have texture as another way to create contrast. But in this one, I don't think we're going to do that. Okay, and actually I'm going to move that under the shadow and probably give this a little bit of a color layer effect as well. Probably linear burn is good there. And then I should be able to actually go back to my yellow, get that same color. And hopefully I can go back to that same texture. I think so. And now I can add the highlights that I would have done this way. What was I on? Screen or color dodge, perhaps, for now. Oh, I think it was add, wasn't it? Okay. And so then from there, this will give us more of the highlights that we want. One thing I was thinking about is how much to kind of exaggerate, like, is this actually bone? You know, the skull mask, is it bone? Should it have kind of like some suggestions of, you know, kind of actual features of a skull, or is it like a flat application? And I think I'm going to kind of end up splitting the difference a little bit. So rather than like rendering how the nose might be kind of popped out or anything like that, I'm going to mostly keep it flat, but let it have some just kind of suggestions of the texture and a little bit of the, you know, some suggestion of bone, perhaps. But I also do like how kind of sleek it is too. All right, so I think that starts to get into the neighborhood of what I want it to be, and it may not seem like that big of a change, but when you get in here again, kind of into the details, it starts to make a difference as to feeling like it's all part of the same illustration, as opposed to something that didn't get addressed over the course of it. So that's going to be it for the moment, and I will be back for more quirky fun. Probably not today, or at least not for a bit. As I mentioned at the beginning of the stream, if you're still here, or if you're watching now, I am going to be doing our weekly live stream for Macroverse coming up at 5 p.m. Pacific. So if you want to tune in and see more of what's happening with what we just released on the mobile app, what's coming out in Epics, what we're doing on Drip House, a couple of the things across the various projects, including things that definitely are relevant to what we're doing with Quirkies. Tune in for that 5 o'clock Pacific on the Macroverse Twitter, as well as on YouTube. And otherwise, I'll see you back for more quirky fun later today or tomorrow at the worst case. And with that, ending the stream. Have fun, everybody.